Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am Justin Skizik from the Rise Up podcast. I'm here with Mr. Tim DeBellis. He is a luxury real estate agent, and he's located specifically in Sonoma County, California, wine country. If you've never been there, it is an absolutely beautiful place to be, and I am jealous that you get to live there. So, Tim, welcome to the Rise Up podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, Justin. I really appreciate it. Great, great. I love your podcast, and a great opportunity. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share my story.
All right. Well, I want to dive right into it if you don't mind. Uh, Give me kind of the lay of the land here. First off, give me a kind of the short 30,000 foot view of W Real Estate, the brokerage that you're a part of. And
Mhm.
then we'll transition in on how did you get into real estate within Sonoma? Just kind of give me the lay of the land here. How'd you get into everything?
Sure, sure, absolutely. Well, let me start first with W Real Estate. So I am an agent affiliated with W Real Estate. We're based here in Santa Rosa, California, specifically, but we have 12 offices throughout the North Bay area. And W Real Estate is the largest independent brokerage in the North Bay, north of San Francisco. So I've been with W Real Estate my entire real estate career, actually. I'm in my 10th year in real estate. And it's just an amazing brokerage and a great atmosphere, great climate. So I really enjoy being part of this team. Yep.
Well, that tells you something about, if you've been with a brokerage for 10 years, it tells you something about them and that they're doing things right. You wouldn't be there
Sure.
that long if they weren't. So
I do.
kudos.
Exactly. I see people move around and bounce around to different brokerages, but no, this is, it's the brokerage for me for sure.
Well, that's good. So whoever the team that's in charge, great job. Kudos to you guys. So tell me, Tim, like how did you get into real estate? So you've been in this game, well, at least 10 years. So
Yeah.
like tell me how you got in there and then what excites you about, real estate specifically within, Northern California.
Sure. Well, my path is a little bit sort of windy. And I think you'll find if you talk to most real estate agents, nobody like just goes directly into real estate. There's always some background that people have. Mine is no different in that sense. I'm actually, my first career out of college was in the aerospace industry. So I have an aerospace engineering degree and I spent 10 years in Southern California in the aerospace industry and working on some pretty cool programs, actually, one of which was the space shuttle program. So really enjoyed that. From that career, I moved into a short stint in higher education. I was a program administrator at a local community college down in Southern California, which then springboarded me into my consulting career. So I was a consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers for nearly 20 years, primarily based in the LA area. Really enjoyed that career, very fulfilling, very rewarding. But it got to a point where I decided, I need to do something different. That
Mhm.
lifestyle is a pretty rigorous lifestyle. A lot of travel was involved. And I just decided that I was at a point in life where I wanted to kind of pull back from that lifestyle and realizing that, I wasn't, while I was really enjoying the work that I was doing, I would say that I wasn't necessarily passionate about it. And so I had to do a little bit of soul searching and trying to realize what was my passion. What is it that I really truly enjoyed in life? What gave me joy? And believe it or not, it was, I wouldn't say real estate specifically, but it was the idea of, beautiful homes, being surrounded by beautiful homes. I just love architecture. I love, a well-designed home and I love how that makes me feel when I'm inside the space. And I thought to myself, that is the direction I want to move into in this, what would be my fourth career now. And so I made that leap. I took that leap of faith, and it was the best decision of my life because while it may seem very different from my previous careers, in many ways it's very similar. Certainly to my consulting career, Because at the end of the day, real estate really is about client service. And
Yeah.
so I had just finished off a career of nearly 20 years in the client service industry. And so really was able to translate and port over all of the skills, all of the experience that I learned in consulting. And believe it or not, even in my engineering days, all of those techniques, problem solving techniques, project management techniques, all of those, all of those skill sets, all of that experience kind of came together in this really sort of unique way. And it allowed me to jump into this industry. And as I said, I've been doing it for 10 years now. And I couldn't really imagine doing anything else at this point.
So, can you expand on that a little bit more, if you don't mind? Would you have an example or two of like, okay, from the early days of your career, like the engineering side of it, how does that played out in what you do today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my early years, early career as a engineer, big part of my role was troubleshooting. So I worked on a lot of, Department of Defense aircraft programs. And so we were building and testing these new aircraft. And so part of my role was to test out the flight control systems, making sure that everything worked like it was supposed to work. And oftentimes, we'd find issues and we'd find problems. So you'd have to troubleshoot and try to find a solution for that problem. Sometimes it was rather simple, sometimes it was more complex. And anybody who's had any sort of real estate experience, whether you're on the buying side, the selling side, or whatever, you
Yeah,
know that
I can imagine.
a real estate transaction is just riddled with issues and riddled with problems.
Yeah.
So having that fundamental, that foundational skill set of problem solving was really important. And then part of that early career was focused around project management too, and being able to manage to a specific timeline and a specific project schedule. And again, a real estate transaction is driven by a set of milestones and a schedule, and so adhering to that schedule was really, really critical, in those days. And it's, equally critical now. Again, a lot of times people can't really see how an engineering degree and a real estate career kind of line up. But, these are two just examples of how
Yeah.
those skill sets are direct transfer into what I do today.
Yeah, and I imagine, with, California legal bureaucracy, there's a bit of, creative thinking you gotta do from time to time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the other thing that is really important is, in my consulting career, working with clients and managing client expectations, and also really kind of expanding and just increasing my project management abilities. Because a lot of what I did in consulting was implementing, new business strategies, implementing business changes. So, managing all of that stuff and sort of herding the cats, if you will, was an important skill set that I developed in that career. And again, very similar in real estate. We've got our clients, and you need to manage your client expectations. You need to be communicating effectively with your clients. But I find most importantly, it's how do you corral the cats, so to speak, and how do you
I
get
love that
people
term.
who aren't necessarily reporting to you or directly
Yeah.
responsible to you? How do you get everybody sort of lined up and kind of marching in the same direction, and it's that sort of stuff. So again, all of these skill sets, all of these experiences that I developed, gosh, over the past 40 years have all just, hit home here in my real estate career now.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to recognize, and you're really kinda hitting the nail on the head here, that, you know, just because you have maybe, like in your case, they may not on paper or even just at first glance may not look like they're related at all. The industries are a lot of things that people you can learn from previous experiences that can translate into, chapter 4 for you or whatever that is, like, in your professional endeavors. It's not all wasted, let's just put it that way, right? So, so I think it's a good point that you're making that, you know, it's good to do a little bit of soul searching from time to time. Like find the joy, like find what you want to do, and life is short. Like we should do what we enjoy. We should.
It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
It's not to say that this industry and this career doesn't have its challenges, because it
Of
certainly
course.
does.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, any industry, any career, any job that you have, you're going to be faced with challenges, and you just kind of work through that. But at the end of the day, if you can sort of kind of reflect back and say, while this might have been a really challenging week, or maybe this was a really challenging transaction, at the end of the day, would I want to be doing anything different? And if the answer is no, then you're in the right place for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I mean, every job I've yet to hear of any job that's like literally stress free, zero issues at all.
Right.
If
Right.
so, somebody please message us so that we can do the same thing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I
Okay.
think
So
for me,
yeah.
if
Go
I
ahead.
could just expand one more thing, what has been really personally rewarding for me is, for the vast majority of my career prior to this, it was very analytical, very fact-based driven. Whereas here, and again, as I mentioned, I can use all of that background and that experience and that knowledge. But what has really been personally rewarding for me is the fact that I'm in a career where I can really exercise now a lot of the creativity side of my brain, and
Mm,
really get very creative, not just from a problem solving standpoint, but when you think about marketing and when you think about more of the softer side of things in a real estate transaction. That's what's been really fulfilling and rewarding to me over the last few years. It's just being able to now exercise in collaboration, I guess, with the more analytical side of my brain, using all those creative skills a lot more.
yeah. I mean, creativity is some people would say that, oh, I'm not creative, right? They might say, oh, and they automatically, and I don't know if you can elaborate on this even more further, but some people that I come across, I have a creative brain. I'm kind of built like you. I'm creative, but I also have an analytical side. But when people say I'm not creative, they think, oh, just because you're not creative, you can't draw. Like being
Right.
creative means looking at problems, looking at challenges, looking at situations where maybe it's a client or a particular housing deal that you're working through, and trying to figure out what are unique ways to get through this that we can you know get to the finish line, as they say, right?
Right.
So creativity is it's a superpower, I think, that in business and entrepreneurship is something that should be harnessed as much as possible. Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how you've been in this game 10 years now ish. So how do what are your ideal clients, or who comes to you? Who do you like to work with? Give me your, of course you probably like to work with anybody, but who do you really enjoy working with?
One of the things that I with my co-agent who I work a lot with, he happens to be my broker as well. We always talk about who's that ideal client and what kind of ideal client would we like to be working with. And at the end of the day, when you talk about a real estate transaction, when you boil it all down to everything, it's the decision of the client, not fundamentally different than any other client service profession, but it's really the client's decision. The seller, how much they want to list their house for, a buyer, how much they want to offer for a home. At the end of the day, it's their decision. But when they hire us, when they hire me, they're hiring me for my expertise, for my knowledge, and for my guidance and advice. And so when you have clients that recognize that, that recognize the value in the experience and the background and the knowledge that I bring to the table for them, and they're open and willing to listen to that advice and act on that advice that is always given in their best interest, I think things go very, very smoothly. you know, that's not to say that, again, as we discussed, that there's not going to be issues that arise. But when clients value the guidance and the information and the advice that they're paying you for, that's the ideal client.
Well put.
There certainly are times when that doesn't always work that way. And
Yeah.
I think it's important too, it is because at the end of the day, it is the client's decision. And it's great when clients go back and forth with us and with me, and they don't question things just because they want to question it, but they question it because they want to be more informed.
Hmm.
My three principles when I'm working with clients are: I want to inspire them, I want to inform them so that they can be empowered to make the decisions that they're going to be required to make in a real estate transaction. And I follow those three principles all the way through a relationship. So a client who's also aligned with those principles is, in my opinion, the ideal client. So that's who I like. So yeah, whether they're buying, a $500,000 first time starter home, or they're selling a $5 million, wine country estate, it doesn't matter. If they're open to that principle and that journey, and embracing that knowledge and it and guidance that we're offering, that I'm offering, yeah, that's the ideal client.
So is it fair to say that it's the trust factor, right? They have to trust you in order
Yes,
for them to. That's really the core element of it. Do you have any thoughts or any advice you could give to other real estate agents of when trust goes sideways? So as an agent, always trying to build that trust, because that's obviously why they hired you. Like, that's why if I was to hire you as my agent, I would be leaning on you for advice, right? That's trust. Like, we're hitting the ideal scenario here, right?
yeah,
But sometimes, like, an outside force, for the sake of a better way of saying it, I don't know, but could maybe get a client off target. That, somebody's like, "Oh, you shouldn't sell your house for 5 million. You need to sell it for 10 million." You're like, "Well, it's not worth 10 million." Like, what I'm saying? Like, sometimes it
I
can
know
just go
exactly
way
what
off,
you're saying.
right?
Yes,
So,
I know exactly what. Yeah,
how do you have any tips or strategies or thoughts of how do you get your client back on this? You're
sure. And it's a great question because it happens all the time. There's always whenever someone's in a real estate transaction. And just to kind of clarify for your audience, your listeners, I deal strictly in residential real estate. I do not do commercial real estate. Commercial is a very different sort of dynamic and a different animal altogether. So when I talk about real estate, I'm talking specifically residential real estate. It's very common because buying a home, selling a home is an emotional journey. There's just no getting around it. Even if it's an investment property, there's always an element of emotion. And whenever that happens, people just naturally want to pull others into their journey with them. If it's, first time home buyers, they're likely going to be pulling in their parents, for guidance and advice, right? As well. It's easy to pull in, friends and other family members and, neighbors, trusted neighbors, because you hit the nail on the head, Justin. At the end of the day, it's the foundation of trust that makes all of this happen. And a lot of times, when we start to work with somebody, when I start to work with somebody, we haven't really had an established relationship. So how is that trust going to get built very quickly? So there's an element of, in the course of, your initial conversations with someone, developing that sort of that confidence, I guess, building that confidence in them that you know what you're doing, you have the gravitas, and you have the skill set to do what they need to do. And I think it's a couple things. It is demonstrating the confidence that you can take them along on this journey and get them to where they need to go, and that you can demonstrate your competence in getting them there as well. I think those are the two fundamental elements that you have to be able to demonstrate right at the very beginning. because you don't have that trust. And, they've got long established relationships with other people, as I said, family members, neighbors, who they're more likely going to listen to maybe at the front end of the process because, well, I don't know this guy, but I've been with my family the whole time, and my mom and dad have purchased homes multiple times, so they must know what they're talking about, right? So it's really working to establish that level of confidence and demonstrating the competence that begins to sort of build that foundation of trust. And then it's really just executing and demonstrating and doing what you told them you were going to be doing at the front end. And the more that you demonstrate that you're doing what you told them that you're going to do, and they can see the progress of their journey, it really begins to build the trust up pretty quickly at that point. Now,
Okay.
can it go sideways? Absolutely. Does it go sideways in the deal? Absolutely. So then you've got to go back and you've got to reassess. Well, why did the question of trust, or where did the erosion of trust happen? Why did it happen? What are the factors that led to that? And you've also you've got to do sort of in the moment triage to understand what changed. Maybe there's some external factors that came into the mix, and then really, again, this is back to the problem solving stage and the skill set, understanding what this new dynamic is. How does that now factor into the going forward? And how do you sort of rebuild or reestablish that level of trust and confidence in the clients? Yeah, it happens, and you've just got to figure out how to work your way through it.
Yeah. Well, humans are humans, right?
Exactly.
You're dealing with
Exactly.
emotions, you're dealing, and you're right. I mean, buying a home and, whether if it's a $500,000 house or, a $10 million house, it's still like, it's a stressful thing,
Very much.
One of the most was it, they say it's one of the most stressful things that you can go through other than having a child, and like, and then getting married as well at the same time. It's like, goodness gracious.
Yeah.
So and you're specifically within Sonoma County. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So what are you seeing in Sonoma from real estate industry? Like, I'm just really curious to see what's going on in your pocket of the world of the state, and what are the shifts that are happening? What are you seeing on the ground these days?
Sure. Well, I think Sonoma County, much like the broader real estate industry at large, is experiencing some of the same things. We've seen a tremendous shift in the market in a very rapid time frame over the past year, I would say, year to year and a half. And so, we've seen a very, very big swing from what has historically been a very strong seller's market for, as I said, I've been in the industry for 10 years now here, but going back even further, we've been in a very, very strong seller's market for probably a good 15 years now. And it's been a very, it's been a very, very good for the sellers for sure, very challenging for the buyers. Limited inventory, very strong home values, and led to the dynamics that we had leading up to the pandemic, and then into the pandemic, like the entire country, and I might dare say even throughout the world. During the pandemic, there was a huge demand, and prices rose dramatically. Here in Sonoma County, we saw home values jump, you know, 30% on average, over
Whoa.
the course of a couple of years, just because the demand was so great. If you kind of know where Sonoma County is located, we're north of San Francisco in wine country. So during the pandemic, we had a lot of people exiting out of the city, moving from Silicon Valley, moving up here to wine country because, everybody could do remote work. And, if you've got to sort of isolate or kind of quarantine yourself, why not quarantine in a beautiful location,
I
wine
can see
country?
the logic. I can see the
You
logic.
don't want it, right? So we saw a huge demand in that, as well as, again, many parts of the country. People were very mobile. Your area, in Boise saw a huge, demand in housing. So that pushed prices incredibly quickly. Then, as we kind of came out of the pandemic and then, dealing with the economy, the aftermath of the economy, from that standpoint, the interest rates rise. And so all of these factors have shifted the dynamics of what had been historically a very stable market, although favoring the sellers. Now we have all of these new dynamics and all these new shifts. Where are we today? We're still seeing some of the after effects of that. Home prices have somewhat stabilized in our area, in particular in Sonoma County. We haven't seen a real decline in home prices. We've seen more of a stabilization in the home values. So home prices are still remaining relatively stable. We're kind of back to seeing a nominal sort of year over year value increase of maybe about 3% or something like that, give or take, in different segments of the market. But we're seeing some different dynamics. In the luxury space, which is where I spend the majority of my time, very different story. We've seen an incredible amount of inventory coming on the market. We've got quite a supply of luxury homes in our area. Luxury is defined by 2 million and above. And so that's a very different dynamic. Homes are lingering on the market quite a long time. And as all of these dynamics have kind of come into play, we've shifted pretty quickly and pretty dramatically into more of a stable market, but in certain tiers, definitely more of a buyer's market. And because buyers have been basically at the receiving end of everything for the past 15 years, now all of a sudden they have this newfound power,
They're like,
and
ha.
they are wielding that power very, very visibly. And so it's a big shift, I think, on the selling side. Sellers are still a little bit reluctant to recognize the realities of the market. And so, that's an educational process, goes back to that informing principle that I spoke about earlier. So we're seeing still sort of the after effects of this big sort of, shakeup because of the pandemic era. And where things settle out, I think we're seeing a bit more of a balanced market as we continue to move forward, which I think is definitely more of a healthy situation to be in for sure.
Yeah.
So yes, we're kind of seeing the same general dynamics that the rest of the country's seeing, but here in Sonoma County, we're not seeing any erosion of prices. Prices have remained relatively stable, but we are definitely seeing a shift more in favor of buyers at this point.
Okay. Well, that's good ish. Good,
But
good
then
news.
they're dealing with the elevated interest rates. So
Yeah.
that
I
kind
was,
of
I
balances
was
things out.
fortunate enough in, geez, what was it? The second year of the pandemic? I was able to refi my house at like 2.6. It was like nuts, the interest rate I got. I'm like, I'm not letting go of that bad boy. Yeah.
And that's a real issue. I mean, we're starting to see that issue thaw just a little bit, because at the end of the day, people still need to sell their homes because life events happen.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that's been sort of the driving factor in a lot of the home sales lately, not just somebody deciding that, oh, I want to sell my home because, I just want to sell my home. It's really driven by more life events.
Mm.
And if there's not a life event that's necessarily driving the sale of a home, to your point, why am I going to give up my 2.5% mortgage and buy another home, at 3 times the interest rate? So that lock-in effect that we've seen that was pretty prevalent, sort of the last year, 18 months, we're starting to see that thaw just a little bit, but it's still definitely a factor.
Okay. Good. Yeah. It's a, if you've never been, if somebody's watching this, you've never been to Sonoma County, it's adjacent to Napa. It is absolutely stunning. So it doesn't surprise me that during the pandemic, people are like, I can sell my house here and move to a beautiful place and work remotely. I think I might.
Yeah,
So
why
yeah.
not?
Yeah, why not? So, what's been kind of one of the biggest wins for you so far this year? Maybe a house that took forever to sell, I don't know, like, or maybe just you made a client's dream come true. Like, what excites you about something that's happened to you so far this year?
Sure. Two things I would say in particular this year. So back at the end of last year, we were called by these home sellers. They had their home listed, and it just weren't getting the traction or the activity that they were hoping for. So they called. They spoke with me and my partner, and we ended up getting the listing. Beautiful home out in West Sonoma County, 20 acres, views of the ocean, redwood trees. I mean, it just had everything.
Beautiful.
And it had a pretty decent price point to go along with that, right? So it was a little bit of a challenge just because of the price point and the location in which it was. But we stuck with it, and we really, stayed committed to getting this home sold for them and getting the price that they were looking for. And it took a while. And this was a somewhat unique home, and we knew that going in, and we explained that to them going in, that this is going to be one of those homes that may take a little longer because we've got to find just that right buyer who's going to appreciate all of the value in that home. And it did take a while, it did take a few months to do that, but ultimately we found that buyer. And I think it was just that the tenacity, it's the commitment, it's the marketing strategy that we used, and we weren't afraid to pivot when we needed to with the marketing strategy. So I think all of that coming together and then selling the home for what many other realtors thought would never happen, happened. So I think that was
All
a
right.
really good win. And it really gave me and reinforced, I guess I would say, the confidence in the strategy that we laid out. And we executed on the plan that we had laid out at the very beginning. And while it took a little time, it proved to be the right strategy and the right plan. And so that was a big win for me. Personally, I felt, we did a really great job on that. And,
Well, congrats. That's awesome.
now they're looking for a new, multi-million dollar home to purchase. So that's great.
There you go. There you
Um,
go.
yeah. On the other side of things, we had a recent listing that we sold, got it into contract within 3 days. And for me personally, this was one of the biggest sales that I had so far in my career. We took a very unique marketing approach to this, and I've always believed that there's a story behind every home. In fact, that's one of my underlying sort of strategies is this notion of storytelling. And I've really embraced that concept over the past few years. So looking at this home, which was a gorgeous home in one of the higher end neighborhoods here in Santa Rosa, and saying, let's take a completely different approach on how we're going to market and promote this home. And let's think about this like a luxury brand. How does luxury brands promote their services and their products? And it's really creating that vision. It's creating that lifestyle that people are going to connect with. And it's not to say that other marketing techniques don't sort of promote the lifestyle. We took it to the next level, and we actually essentially filmed a mini movie and created a sort of a lifestyle movie that's centered around this home. We had narrative, we had a story to tell. We casted for the roles. We had several roles. We casted for the roles. We had a whole cast and crew. And basically, we filmed this whole story about a day in the life of this family living in this home and what they experienced and what their life was like. It was it was a little bit of a risk, I will say. I wasn't
Yeah.
quite exactly sure how it was going to turn out, but
Yeah.
it turned out beautiful. It got great reception. We had thousands of views on Instagram, and these were all organic views. There was nothing boosted or anything like that. So it was a huge success. And again, it just reinforced my ideas that, we're at a point in time where how do you differentiate yourself in a very competitive space? And the
Hmm.
luxury real estate market here in Sonoma County is very competitive. It's relatively small, and there are well-established players in this space. So how do you really differentiate yourself? And I think one of the ways that I'm doing that is, again, going back to this creativity concept we
Hmm.
talked about at the very beginning. looking across different industries, looking across different luxury brands. How do they market their services? How do they create a lifestyle emotion that resonates with people? And, when I'm sitting and watching TV at night, I look at commercials very different now. Before
Yeah.
I used just to
You're like,
fast
wait a
forward through
minute.
commercials.
I
Yeah,
like
wait a
that.
minute, wait a minute. I'm looking at this car commercial, and this car commercial is making me feel something. Why is it making me feel something?
Yeah.
So I really take a lot of cues from other luxury brands and try to incorporate those now into how to market and promote a home so that it does stand out and it is a unique and differentiated experience that somebody sees when they're scrolling through on their phone.
Right. Yeah.
We did it and it was a great success. And so I would say that's another big win for this year.
That is really cool. As I've been having conversations with other people within the luxury industry that in completely different verticals, not just, real estate, but everything. It's how do you think differently? How do you become different than everyone else? Because, you're in a space where it's highly competitive. You got to be able to think, on your feet. You got to be able to take risks sometime. So, if you could speak to the element of risk, to do that video, of course, that's not free to do, at all, as you probably know, because you're the one who had to deal with all of the payments and with everything. I don't want to get into like how much it costs, but I know that creating, coming from a branding and marketing background, that stuff is not cheap. So, you're taking a risk on something to sell a property. You probably have a hunch about it. Like you wouldn't just do it, willy nilly. Like there's a reason for it. So, can you, if you think back to that moment where you're like, we're going to do this thing, we're going to get the crew, we're going to whatever, like you're taking a risk there. So,
Yeah.
what was your kind of mental state, if you can reflect back on that, of going through that process of like, we're doing it, like, here we go.
Yeah. It was very nervous. I was nervous. Yeah, I had to tell my co-listing agent, who's as I mentioned again, my broker. I said, I really think that this is the right house. I'd shared the idea with him before, but I said, I think this is the right house to really kind of, dive in it and try this thing. And he goes, yeah, I'm into it. He's great like that. He's very much into, let's do something unique. Let's do something different. And I said, I just want to let you know it's going to be quite an investment to do that. Okay, that's fine. Let's do it. When I finally told him how much it was, he was like, "What? Trust me, go with it. Trust me on this. I had been thinking about this for quite some time. I think again, I look at this industry and I look at how homes are marketed. And for a very, very long time, homes have been marketed essentially the same way. Photography has gotten better. And certainly with the advent of video, video shots of the home, we call them the beauty shots, right? These beautiful cinematic videos going through the house. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But they're all sort of the same. It's all the same thing. It's just showing this sort of static, the static home. And a home is so much more than that, right? It's where we live. It's where our story gets told.
Yeah.
It's where emotions happen in our lives. And I really started thinking about a year and a half ago. I said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to do things differently and in turn, differentiate myself in the industry. What can I bring that's new and unique and differentiated to my clients or when they're interviewing us? So that was kind of the genesis of that. And then going back to what I said just a little bit ago, I look at commercials on TV now and I look at them from a completely different perspective. What is that commercial telling me? What is that commercial doing for me? What lifestyle is that commercial sort of presenting? What
Hmm.
aspirational element of life is that giving me? And is that drawing some sort of emotion from me? And so I really started pulling all of these sort of data points together. And I was talking with my video team, I don't know, several months ago, and I said, I got this idea, and I really would like to do something like that. And he was all on board with it as well. So, it took a little while to find just the right home to test out this
Mhm.
hypothesis, I guess. And luckily, we got that home. Yeah. So it was a bit nervous, again, because it was a bit of an investment for sure. And would it play out? And would it resonate with the public? And I'm happy to say that it did. And so again, it just sort of reinforces these notions and these ideas that I have in my head about how to truly, you know, what value am I bringing to my clients that is differentiated and at the same time is going to get them to where they want to be, which is selling their home.
Mhm.
Unique way that's going to draw in those buyers quickly.
Yeah. Can you just quickly educate me on, okay, when you do an investment like that, you're taking a risk on something that's, it's, you're not staging the house. I mean, well, there's things that you do with a house, right? You stage it, you get it all ready, and you can do events. I mean, there's all sorts of things. But to do something like this, you're putting up the capital ahead of time. So how does that work within your industry? Like, do you recoup that, or is that in a line item expense when it comes to just the marketing of the home, promoting the home?
Yeah, it's essentially just a line item expense. The marketing is all comes out of the fees. I think, people don't realize that. All the marketing that gets done for a home essentially comes out of the fees of the commission that we negotiate with our clients. So, this was something that we took on. We made the decision that we were going to invest this money in this particular home, with this particular listing to do this. Because one, at certain point in time, you just got to make the investment. You've got to commit to trying something to see if it's really going to work or not. The beauty is that just because it was specifically for that home, that doesn't mean that we can't reuse and repurpose that in multiple different ways. So we can obviously use it when we're talking with new clients and saying, here's the type of things that we do that differentiate us in the marketplace. And it's going to differentiate your home in turn as well. We can use it to, continue. Just because the home was sold doesn't mean you can't continue to tell the story of that home, right?
Mm,
And continue to show people how you can creatively tell a story, even though that home is no longer for sale. So it was an investment certainly for that listing, but we know and we continue to use that investment in numerous other ways so that, in time you can amortize that cost over multiple
yeah.
different,
Yeah, it
channels.
makes sense. I mean, some people forget that sometimes you like that piece. It's an asset that you've built. So,
Right.
and you can leverage that uh, across multiple platforms, across different ways of you repurpose it a lot. I do
Exactly.
see that a lot with some of the clients that I work with from time to time. They just think, "Oh, I do this one thing and that's it." Like, no, you can use things over and over again, like, why not? You spent the time creating it. Why not leverage it to, get more clients or more discussions to help sell homes or whatever you need to do. So, it's a
Exactly.
it's a long-term payoff for a short-term investment.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And so,
So
it was fun. It was fun to do, number one, and I think the thing is, in fact, I just was talking with my video team and I said, we like anything, you learn. And there was a few things that maybe we would do a little differently on the next one. But by and large, we proved the idea. And so, yeah, we're going to continue to move forward with that, as
cool.
time goes on.
Well, I can't wait to take a look at it. And if you're, watching this and in the show notes, you should be able to check it out too. So, um, I have a question for you. What other outside of kind of like the video that the custom video that you created, or the story, we'll call it the story video. What other marketing channels are working real well for you these days?
Social media obviously is a big one for me. So it's interesting because I'm my own real estate agent. However, I work for W Real Estate, so I'm affiliated with them. So I do my own marketing through my own Instagram, social media, accounts and everything. But then W Real Estate as the brokerage also does social media marketing, print marketing. So social media definitely is a place where I focus a lot of my personal marketing. I love creating little Instagram reels and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that goes, I keep touching back to this creative side of things. I actually enjoy doing that stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I put out on my Instagram and Facebook accounts are things that, I create myself. So we'll get the video from the videographer, but then I take that, the big video and I kind of chunk it up and tell little story vignettes from that. So I enjoy doing that stuff.
Fun.
Believe it or not, here in Sonoma County and in particular our area, print, in fact, the local Sunday real estate section is still a
Old
big
school.
factor. Yeah, old
All
school.
right.
It really does draw a lot of attention. It gets a lot of eyes. So we still focus very heavily on print, but yeah, a lot of social media and different channels. I belong to a couple of different real estate networks. One of them is Who's Who in Luxury Real Estate. So we do marketing through that network, and it's a global network. And so, we have the properties that we're promoting. We are promoting these properties worldwide. And it's a great resource to have. And again, when you're talking with a client and say, how are you differentiating yourself from, one of the big, brands, the big corporate brands? Well, they might have a global network, but we too have a global network.
Hmm.
And I think the thing that really kind of resonates with a lot of our clients is, we're not just part of this network in name only. In fact, I'm a very active participant in this network. And in fact, I'm going to be going to San Diego next week for the fall Who's Who in Luxury Real Estate Conference. So it's participating and building these relationships with other luxury real estate agents across the country and around the world that really comes back and benefits the client at the end of the day. Because, when I have a particular property that I can reach out to somebody in my network and say, hey, I've got a great wine country estate. Is there any of your clients in Portugal who might be interested in California wine country estate? And so it's having those direct relationships and those personal relationships with those folks in the network that I think is again another differentiator that I bring to the clients, and it's very valuable for them.
What are you looking at to try to maybe dial in over the next maybe 6 to 12 months? Well, like a marketing channel that you see an opportunity that most people really haven't tapped into, or that you see an opportunity for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been thinking about that in particular. While I do a lot of social posting, I don't do a lot of video myself. And I've been told numerous times, you really need to do more video. You need to be in front of the camera more often. And I'm watching this one particular realtor in Italy. We're traveling to Italy next month, and we're just going to be kind of researching and exploring some of the areas over there. And so, like a lot of people, right? Where do you go get your information? You go to YouTube, right?
YouTube. Yeah. Who is it? Who is it? We probably might. I might know him. I might have recognized it too. Who's the person? Do you mind saying?
He's a great realtor. His videos are so engaging. Danilo Romanelli.
Ah, yes, Daniela Romeo. Yeah. Yep. From
Yeah, he's really good. In fact, I reached out to him through Instagram and I said, "Hey, we're coming to Italy. I would love to connect up with you." So, we're going
yeah,
to try to make it happen. But,
yeah. Young guy.
I
He's a
think,
young guy, right?
holy
Yeah,
cow, I'm
yeah,
sitting here watching these videos and he's just
yeah,
touring somebody through the home, and I'm so captivated and so engaged by them. And
yeah.
yet, I don't do them myself. So that is
Okay.
something that I'm definitely focusing on and trying to incorporate more, into the coming months, is really actually doing that. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to that principle, one of my three principles. I'm inspiring people about, a particular home just through the video tours and that kind of stuff. So that's
Yeah.
definitely
Okay.
something I'm going to be focusing on more.
Well, you have to fill me in on your return. On if you end up meeting him or not. I've watched a lot of his videos. Like, he's really good. He just
He's
goes around
very
and
good. So
yeah, goes
entertaining.
around and travel. Here's this property. Yeah, here's it. Gives the history of the place and this and that. Yeah, definitely worth checking out.
Yeah.
If you, I have a few more questions for you. If you could kind of wave a magic wand, a metaphorical magic wand, and fix one thing in your business, what would that be?
Hmm. I think it would be, and I'm sort of in the middle of this right now. It's really getting my business processes documented and systematized. In order for me to be able to scale up my business. I think it's not uncommon, and this is just my perception, but I don't think it's uncommon, is what I should say. That when you get into this industry and you start working as a real estate agent, real estate advisor, a lot of times you're just running running and just doing whatever has to get done. You know, each transaction is sort of restarting all over again from scratch. I think the challenge with that is you're not building this consistency, you're not building the standardized way of doing things that ultimately allows you to scale and to some degree delegate certain things that take my time away from those mission critical things. And at the end of the day, I believe the mission critical element in what I'm doing here is developing these relationships and fostering these relationships and carrying and managing the relationships with my clients. So if I could wave my magic wand, all of that stuff would be done.
That would be nice.
And I can truly focus on scaling the business and bringing more resources into the business in a way that I've got a solid foundation, a solid process, and things are systematized in a way that the experience that I'm delivering to my clients can be somewhat replicated to others and allowing them to deliver the same level of experience, the same type of experience. Because at the end of the day, I, I embrace this notion that I am building a brand. I stand very firmly behind that concept of brand awareness and brand promise. And so I have been working these 10 years, one, to just understand myself. What is my brand? What is my brand promise? And then once I had that understanding and I had that clarity, it's now building around that the capabilities, the systems, the processes that can routinely and consistently deliver that brand experience. Not just me doing it, but others as well. That's all right.
Okay. I have a couple of reflective questions. If you could look back 10 years ago when you started this whole thing in the real estate specifically, what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
That is a great question, and I did read it on the question form, so I was thinking a lot about that, and I didn't have to think too hard about it. If I could tell my 10-year earlier self what I know today, it would be, do not underestimate the difficulty of this business. I'm not embarrassed to say, I'm not ashamed to say that I woefully underestimated how challenging this business could be. I came from, you know, quite a successful background in multiple careers. And I thought to myself, man, how hard can this be? Right. I've done some pretty amazing things and I've had some pretty challenging careers. How hard could this be? Very difficult, very challenging. And I think, unfortunately, because I underestimated that early on, I struggled because I didn't want to sort of accept the fact that, wow, I'm not an instant success in this industry. And why aren't people picking up the phone to call me just because I'm here now? I think there was an element of hubris as well.
A little bit of
But
naivety.
it was a rude awakening. And once I finally sort of, came to terms with that and said, no, you got to put the work in, you got to put the time in. And this is a long game business. And, you've got to just, you know, accept that and really put the work in and build that base, build that trust, build that foundation and build that brand awareness. And again, it took me some time to, even as I said earlier, just understand for myself what that was. I mean, I kind of knew why I came into this industry. And that hasn't changed, which I think is great. My underlying reasons for why I made this transition are still as sound today as they were when I made that decision. So that's very, very good. But yeah, it was not really having a clear path at the very beginning and not understanding how challenging this business can really be. So if I could talk to my 10-year earlier self, that's what I would tell him.
As you clearly stated, it hasn't been an easy road, right? You got to put in the work. You're gonna have the good days and the bad days. What would you say to somebody who's in real estate going through a time where they're like, why am I doing this? They're highly questioning and they haven't come to terms with, oh, it's a long game here and it's a very hard industry to be in. And, it wasn't the shiny object that somebody said, oh, just become a real estate agent and you'll make millions of dollars,
Yeah, yeah.
and everyone's going to call you every 14 seconds. What would you say to some, like, thinking back about a time where it was really tough for you? You don't have to go into specifics, but I'd like to just kind of, what words of advice would you give to somebody who's in that phase?
Yeah. Um, Interesting. I sort of had a conversation like this with a newer agent, just several weeks ago. They had reached out and said, "Hey, I'm kind of just getting started here. Can we, grab a coffee and can I, pick your brain?" I said, "Sure." I, and I think what I said to that person, I would say to anybody who's starting out in this industry, you really have to understand your why. And I know that sort of maybe is a phrase that's overused or, kind of thrown around pretty easily, but it's so true. This is an industry where you really have to know your why and understand what that is because it is very difficult. I still ask myself that question sometimes.
Why?
It was a very challenging first half of the year. I mean, there was a lot of activity happening, but there were no transactions that were resulting from that activity. So, this is a very cyclical industry as well.
Hmm.
And if somebody wants stability, maybe this is not the right industry to jump into. But
I would
the
agree.
point is, you have to really understand your why. And if you don't understand that, and I know my why now. Like I said, it didn't change from when I made the decision, and I continually check back. Am I still doing this? And is my why still valid? And my why is these two things. One, personally, as I mentioned at the front end of this, I'm passionate about architecture, about home design, about how a home makes me feel when I'm inside of it, the space and everything. Personally, that drives me every day. I love being surrounded by homes like that. It just energizes me personally. Secondly, and I think a lot of this is a result of my consulting experience. I don't think that there's anything more valuable in life than being able to have an impact in someone else's life. And when you think about real estate and you think about what a real estate transaction is, at the end of the day, it represents a transition in someone's journey. And this is where the storytelling analogy comes in. It represents a transition in someone's journey from one chapter to the next. And being able to be part of that experience, I get a little emotional even just talking about it. Having the privilege of being part of that experience in someone's life and being able to help guide them through that transition. I don't think there's anything for me personally. There's very few things that are more rewarding than that. So when I think about, why I do this, those are the two reasons why I do this. Personally, because of my love of architecture, and then sort of the ability, the privilege of being able to make an impact, have an impact in someone's life. So when I talk with other people and if there are newer agents listening to the podcast here, I think that's an important thing that you really have to understand. Why are you doing this?
Why are you doing it?
Because someone told you, oh, why don't you just go get your real estate license and, be a real estate agent? I'm not sure that's the right answer. So that's my take on it. Understand your why and make sure it aligns with what this industry represents.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, I don't think I think it's an underutilized, Simon Sinek made it really popular, but but it's true. You're right on. your why you do it is it will get you through those days where you're like, "Oh, here we are." It's
It's
Friday.
like, yeah, you can have a very challenging and difficult transaction, and you
Yeah,
get through it and you go, "Oh my God, I'm so glad that's over." And then you can have a transaction like we just had, and the client comes back and says, this was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had. Your organizational skills, everything just made this such an amazing experience. I mean, at the end of the day, again, you had an impact in someone's
yeah,
life that meant something, and so that's the
yeah.
reward, really.
Well, what a beautiful thing you get to do is to be invited into somebody's personal life, into a very personal thing. You're like a extension of the family in a certain way, and what an honor that is to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
not everyone has a job that gets to do that, so that's an
yeah.
amazing thing. So, I have two questions for you. One is a fun one. One is a slightly reflective, but maybe I'm trying to hopefully get a short answer, which is if somebody listening to your story, listening to the journey that you've been on through real estate, and what is the one thing you hope somebody could walk away from after hearing your story?
One thing I think, just really kind of reflecting and understanding what drives you personally. What are you truly passionate about, and being able to sort of find a way to incorporate that in your life, whether it is through your career or some other means, but really understanding what drives you personally, what gives you personal satisfaction and personal reward. And I think that's one of the things that I would say, I hope people take away, because, I had a very long career. And as I said, they were enjoyable, and I learned a lot, and I was glad I took those steps along the way, but they ultimately led me to where I am supposed to be. And someone said to me, not too long ago, "Would you be doing anything different?" And I said, no, I feel I was born to do what I'm doing right now, and it took me a long time to get here,
You figured it
but
out.
I figured it out. And I think, yeah, hopefully anybody who's listening, and the takeaway messages, you know, work as long as you have to figure it out, but find what that is.
Lovely. I love that. So appreciate you giving me an honest answer. Fun one to end with. Okay, you're in wine country.
Mhm.
Do you have a particular vineyard that you love is like I love the wine from this particular vineyard or whatever? Are you a wine drinker? First off, if you're not, then you could care less. But I'm kind of assuming that you might be. So there's a pretty good chance that you
I
are. So
am. I
particular
am. Yeah.
vineyard that's your favorite.
There is, and I'm going to give a shameless plug to my favorite vineyard, Lambert Bridge Winery out in Dry Creek Valley. I've been a member there for 10 years, and their wines are exceptional. The winery, the grounds are exceptional. But I will say this in all sincerity. The reason why I keep going back, because we have so many great wines around us. I mean, you can throw a stone and you're, finding a great winery around you here. But the reason I go back, and it's something that really I internalize in my own business too. When we're there, um, they make us feel so special. They make us feel exceptional in their
Mm,
customer service, in how they treat us, and just everything about the experience when we're there just makes you feel like you're their number one client. And yeah, I mean, the wines are exceptional too. Don't get me wrong, but that is probably the number one reason why they are my favorite winery, Lambert Bridge Winery,
Lambert.
Dry Creek
Okay.
Valley.
All right.
By the way, I did a little video about Lambert Bridge also on my YouTube channel, series I do called Sonoma County Connections. So yeah, and I've told them many times, I take a lot of my cues from them and incorporate that into my own business, because how they make us feel when we're there is exactly how I want my clients to feel when they're dealing with me. They're
Good.
my number one favorite.
All right. Well, I might have to check them out when I'm in Sonoma next time. And if you're in the area too, check them out too. Give them some kudos and some love, and go drink some amazing wine. Do you have a particular varietal that are you like a dark red? Are you like a Pinot? Are you a white guy? Like not white as in race, white as like white wine.
Right.
That's what I meant. So don't take it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Somebody reading
Got it.
this or
No,
watching this, like,
totally got it. Totally
yeah,
got
yeah.
it. No, I go across the spectrum.
Okay,
So it just depends on the day. It depends how I'm feeling. It depends on the
okay,
weather. Yeah, I will go, all across the board. Yep.
okay. Well, hey, just FYI, most people don't know this, but Idaho, because I live in Idaho, just outside of Boise, we have a really good Snake River Valley wine country. It's kind of an
Yes.
unknown, it doesn't have the well-known, brand name as like Sonoma or Napa, but they have some really good wines, believe it or not. Like, so if you're up here, maybe I'll send you a bottle or something. One of my
That'd be
favorite
great.
vineyards up here too is called Koenig. So I've
I'll
been a
ship one
member
over
for.
to you. We'll swap wines.
We'll swap wines. There you go. I'm a wine drinker, so. But yeah, hey, how do people get in touch with you? I want to make sure we give you the kudos. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I think the best way to get a hold of me is you could find me on my website, timdebellisrealtor.com. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. All my contact information is there. If you want to look me up on social media, as I said, I'm big on Instagram. That's simply at Tim DeBellis. So you can find me there as well.
Check out your YouTube channel. Put the video for the house that you did the story for. I'm really curious about seeing that too. So, Tim, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's certainly a pleasure. And I have a feeling you and I could probably talk for another hour on stuff.
It's
So,
Friday afternoon. Why not?
yeah, why not? I know you're busy. You got lots you got to deal with. So, thank you so much for carving out time. I enjoyed hearing your story. I enjoy, just hearing your heart and your vision for how you take care of your clients. And this chapter of being in luxury real estate for the last decade hopefully goes for another decade or two. So, I don't
Yeah.
know how long you want to work, but give you blessings for that long. So, yeah, that wraps up today's episode on the Rise Up podcast. Tune in next time, I guess, to see whoever that is, whenever that is. Until then, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you.